At exactly 9:43 a.m., the silence of the palace cracked open when a sealed decree slipped out of the king's private study, its golden trim still warm, carrying the weight of 2 historic signatures. What seemed like another dull piece of royal paperwork quickly exploded into shockwaves across Buckingham Palace. Why? Because one name, a name everyone expected to see, was missing. Queen Camilla. Palace insiders confirmed immediately. This wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate cut. The decree wasn't just another ceremonial note, it was a bold restructuring of royal power in response to rising public pressure and a monarchy trying to survive in a changing world. It laid out new rules, reshaped ceremonial duties, and narrowed the royal lineup in ways that no one saw coming. Most shocking of all, it carried 2 signatures side by side, King Charles and Princess Anne, united in this decision. The document listed only 4 figures in the new core circle: King Charles, Princess Anne, Prince William, and Princess Catherine. Noticeably absent, Prince Andrew, Prince Harry, and jaw-droppingly, Queen Camilla herself. Staffers who've served in the palace for decades whispered that this move was nothing short of a quiet earthquake. And while the royal household has seen reforms before, this moment stood apart, because for the first time in modern history, the Queen Consort was deliberately cut out of a royal paper this monumental. Traditionally, every Queen Consort's name has been inked into these royal decrees, a nod to continuity, tradition, and the symbolic heart of the monarchy. Even if their duties were mostly ceremonial, their presence on paper carried weight. That's why Camilla's absence hit like a thunderclap. It didn't just whisper of change, it screamed betrayal, division, and a monarchy shifting beneath its own crown. The decree may have carried no words of explanation, but the silence shouted louder than any speech. Line by line, the message was undeniable. Camilla's standing as a central royal figure was being carefully erased, her place cut down in ink before the public even had time to blink. But the real sting wasn't just in who was missing, it was in who stood together to make it official. After months of Charles smiling beside Camilla in public, he had quietly joined forces with his sister, Princess Anne, to sign her out of the script. And this wasn't just any Anne. This was the woman long seen as the iron backbone of Queen Elizabeth II's legacy, now helping to slice away Camilla's role with royal precision. This is the same Anne who has always lived by duty over comfort, the one who rarely let her private thoughts spill into the open. Until now, the official statement may have been polished, stiff, and wrapped in formality, but behind those palace doors, the whispers grew sharper, the air heavier, and the silence too loud to ignore. Insiders murmured that Charles paused, hand trembling for a moment, before he finally signed his name. Others swear Anne was steady as stone, cold and calculated, pushing forward without hesitation. To her, survival of the monarchy meant stripping away the extras and locking its focus on one thing: stability. No distractions, no excess, just a tighter crown circle that the public could cling to in uncertain times. And the outcome was brutal. Camilla, the woman crowned in front of the world at Charles's side, was erased in black ink from a document designed to define the royal future. This wasn't just some administrative shuffle. It was a fault line opening right beneath the throne, a sign that power was shifting and the monarchy was ready to redraw its map in real time. But to feel the full weight of what just happened, to understand why Queen Camilla's name was carved out of the monarchy's foundation, we need to roll the clock backward and uncover the steps that led to this seismic cut. Not back to the coronation, not to the wedding, but to the quiet, calculated battles bubbling beneath the royal walls for months. Battles the public never saw, but ones the family felt with every move. Princess Anne never chased the spotlight. That was never her lane. She wasn't built for glamour, she was built for grit. While others chased cameras and headlines, Anne clung to her code of discipline, moving like a shadow no one could ignore. And now, that shadow has become a storm. In the hush of Windsor's halls, Anne has quietly emerged as the most powerful hand guiding the crown. Not with glittering titles or loud fanfare, but with sheer determination and an unshakable resolve. Palace whispers say it straight. It's Anne, not Camilla, who stands closest to the king today, shaping the monarchy's destiny in ways no one saw coming. Since Charles stepped onto the throne, Anne's load has only grown heavier. No glossy press releases, no grand unveilings, just a steady hand absorbing task after task, not handed to her out of affection, but out of pure trust. State visits, military patronages, diplomatic briefs, all quietly falling into Anne's lap, making her the steel spine of the monarchy itself. And while headlines obsessed over Charles, Camilla, and the drama swirling around the younger royals, Anne was the one in the war room. She was there in every high-level strategy session, every closed-door briefing, every critical discussion on protocol. While others smiled for the cameras, Anne was holding the reins behind them all, and slowly, almost without anyone noticing, Anne turned into the one person the monarchy simply couldn't function without. Her rise was striking, not just for what she did, but for how different it looked compared to Camilla. While Camilla tried to step into the ceremonial role once carried by Queen Elizabeth, she leaned on the old model, polite, graceful, steady, untouched by scandal. But that model began to crack under modern pressures. Inside the palace walls, courtiers saw the shift clearly. When Charles needed answers, he didn't turn to Camilla. He turned to Anne, not for soft comfort, but for blunt clarity. Not for nods of agreement, but for the hard truth. Camilla had once been his emotional anchor, but within the machinery of the crown, her presence started to look less vital. Camilla brought charm, yes, but Anne brought strategy, and in a monarchy scrambling to prove its place in the 21st century, charm was no longer a weapon. It was a luxury the crown couldn't afford. The tension was undeniable, even if never spoken on record. Behind closed doors, whispers say Anne pushed back firmly against Camilla's growing ceremonial spotlight, making it clear she wasn't about to let the monarchy waste time on appearances when survival demanded strategy. According to senior aides, Anne pulled Charles aside with a sharp warning. Pushing Camilla too high, too fast would risk alienating not just the palace staff, but the very public keeping the monarchy alive. The late Queen Elizabeth had been careful with her wording, naming Camilla Queen Consort, not Queen. To Anne, those boundaries weren't optional, they were sacred. So when Camilla started testing that title, stretching it beyond its limits, Anne didn't let it slide. She pushed back, polite in tone, but firm enough to leave no doubt. That explosive royal decree making headlines today, the one that erased Camilla's name completely, didn't come out of thin air. Insiders confirm Anne was the driving force pressing for the final version to shrink the roster down to 4: Charles, Anne herself, Prince William, and Princess Catherine. The message was crystal clear. These are the pillars the crown will lean on moving forward. No extras, no exceptions. And while not everyone in the palace agreed with such a ruthless trim, few had the nerve to challenge her. Why? Because Anne's authority is no longer just ceremonial, it's functional, decisive, and quietly dominant. Among senior advisors, her influence has grown so undeniable that a new nickname has started floating through the gilded corridors. They're calling her, what Charles won't say out loud, the strategist behind the throne. It's not written anywhere, and Anne herself would never admit it, but the truth is louder than any title. She's more than just a working royal. Anne has become the monarchy's shield, its stabilizer, its behind-the-scenes fixer. And in an era where the crown is clinging hard to its survival, she's turned into its most crucial architect, quietly shaping the future brick by brick. But every rise comes with a cost, and Anne's climb wasn't free. For her influence to grow, someone else had to shrink. And the first to feel that sting, the Queen Consort herself. Camilla, once thought untouchable, is now paying the price for Anne's ascent. The same woman once celebrated at Charles's side, crowned before the world as his closest confidant, now finds herself on the outside looking in, shut out of key meetings, left off briefing lists, her name erased from official papers that used to stamp her place in history. Instead of whispers and deference, Camilla now walks corridors filled with silence, a silence that cuts deeper than words, a silence that tells her she's no longer the heartbeat of the crown. No official announcement has dropped, no public clash has erupted, but behind the scenes, Queen Camilla is being quietly, almost surgically cut away from the monarchy's inner circle. In recent months, she tried to step forward with a fresh spark, throwing herself into more public appearances, stacking up patronages, and pushing to expand her ceremonial role. To many on the outside, it looked like the natural next step. Camilla finally stepping fully into the light as Charles's partner in power. But inside those palace walls, not everyone welcomed that glow. Her bigger presence didn't feel like progress. It felt like disruption. Senior advisors began whispering that Camilla's push for more visibility was rattling the fragile order left in the shadow of Queen Elizabeth II. To them, her assertiveness wasn't leadership, it was imbalance, and it made the crown feel unsteady. And then there was Anne. The quiet tension between the two women, once masked by polite smiles for the cameras, started to boil beneath the surface. Camilla leaned into modern image-making, cameras and charm, while Anne clung to the unshakable grip of protocol, discipline and tradition. Two women, two visions of royalty, but only one had the king's ear when it mattered. Where Camilla leaned into public charm while trying to keep her private world tightly guarded, Anne held fast to order, protocol, and the old rules of hierarchy. Staff insiders paint a picture of quiet standoffs, tense disagreements over how royal appearances should look, clashing opinions on ceremonial traditions, and a growing unease spreading through the palace's inner circle. Camilla, they say, styled herself as a modern partner to the monarch, reshaping her role for a more progressive age. But that vision slammed headfirst into Anne's iron grip on tradition, a collision that could only end one way. Then came the royal decree, the bombshell document that was supposed to cement the monarchy's future lineup. By centuries of precedent, the Queen Consort's name should have been a ceremonial constant. Yet, when the list was unveiled, Camilla's name was nowhere in sight. Not only was she excluded, she wasn't even asked to weigh in. According to those close to the drafting process, this wasn't some clerical mistake. It was intentional, calculated, and razor-sharp in its message. And the symbolism, impossible to miss. In a monarchy where every word etched onto parchment carries centuries of weight, Camilla's absence thundered louder than any speech. She was no longer being counted in the crown's long-term vision. Those around her described the fallout in whispers, a quiet, unmistakable shift creeping into her daily routines, the kind of subtle changes that mark the difference between being central to power and being pushed to the sidelines. Camilla now learns about decisions secondhand, left to piece together scraps of information after the fact. She's no longer invited into the planning briefings for major state events. Her private office runs on its own track, detached from the tight circle where the real power moves are made. Charles, Anne, William, and Catherine. Choices are locked in without her voice, finalised long before she even hears a whisper of them. And though her smile still beams for the cameras, those close to her insist she feels the sting. This isn't scandal pushing her aside. It's cold, calculated exclusion. Still, Camilla keeps moving forward, carrying herself with quiet determination. But her circle has thinned to almost nothing, and her influence no longer echoes in the inner chambers where the crown's future is carved. With every decree that drops, every private meeting she's left out of, the message grows louder and harsher. The future is being written without her pen. And while Camilla grapples with the bitter taste of isolation, the pressure is tightening on King Charles himself. He's trapped in a vice, a public demanding change, a sister fiercely guarding the crown's legacy, and a fractured family divided over who deserves to stand at the heart of power. Through decades of scandal, criticism, and relentless scrutiny, Charles had clung to Camilla as more than just a partner. She was his lifeline. Now that lifeline is slipping through his grasp, and the world is watching every move. Though she had earned a measure of public respect in recent years, a vocal contingent never fully accepted her beside Charles. Her journey from the other woman to Queen Consort had been remarkable, but not without resistance. To some, her presence still symbolized wounds that had never fully healed. So when the draft decree arrived, outlining a streamlined circle of working royals, Camilla's name lingered in a grey zone. Tradition dictated she belonged. Strategy argued she did not, and Charles stood caught between the two. For days he hesitated. He asked for revisions, circled words, and delayed signatures. His aides described him as restless, pacing, torn. Yet the longer he stalled, the clearer the path became. Not to his heart, but to the institution. Princess Anne was unwavering. Her counsel was blunt, though never unkind. The monarchy must project strength, clarity, and efficiency. If Camilla's inclusion risked diluting that message, she had to be cut from the decree. In Anne's eyes, loyalty to their late mother's principles demanded nothing less. Their relationship had withstood everything the world hurled their way. Yet, when the crown finally settled on Charles's head, so did a burden that love alone could no longer bear. For the monarchy to weather the storm of modern judgment and generational change, he would have to choose. And when the moment came to sign the most consequential decree of his reign, Charles chose duty over devotion, though not without cost. Behind the splendor of the throne lies a truth few ever glimpse: the crushing weight of expectation, the relentless demand to uphold public confidence in an institution centuries old. The monarchy, already scarred by scandals and divided loyalties, was under harsher scrutiny than ever before. Parliament grew impatient, pressing for a monarchy stripped of extravagance, more efficient and less ceremonial, one that justified its cost to the public purse. The press shifted its focus, no longer questioning Charles himself, but debating who was truly worthy to embody the crown. And for many, Camilla's name had always been a complication. It was a spectacle, one decision that turned quiet palace procedure into a global firestorm. Suddenly, the world wasn't just observing the monarchy, it was dissecting it, frame by frame. Major outlets scrambled to confirm the decree, and once they did, the analysis came fast and merciless. Camilla's omission was painted as more than a clerical choice. Some called it a symbolic demotion. Her title may have survived on paper, but her absence from a document of such weight carried a meaning that could not be ignored. This wasn't administrative, it was strategic, and it stung. The media, especially those long critical of her past, framed it as a long-awaited correction of history. Others saw it differently, branding it a betrayal of a woman who had withstood decades of ridicule only to be sidelined when the crown finally rested securely on her husband's head. And then came social media, unfiltered, ruthless, and divided. One camp hailed the move as justice long overdue, a restoration of Diana's legacy. The other called it cruel, arguing that Camilla had paid her penance, earned her place, and now deserved more than to be erased by palace politics. But one thing was certain: everyone had an opinion. Hashtags clashed, think pieces flooded the internet overnight, and the tone, anything but neutral. Polls soon followed, adding numbers to the noise. One survey showed 62% of respondents supporting Camilla's removal. When asked why, most pointed to one name: Princess Anne. To the public, Anne had become the face of integrity, her approval ratings soaring while Camilla's sank. It wasn't just a preference, it was a verdict. Tradition over controversy, duty over convenience. International media seized on the deeper question. From Paris to New York, the headlines weren't just about Camilla. They were about Charles. If he had stood by her for decades, why hadn't he protected her now? Was this strategy or betrayal? A shift in royal dynamics, or the unraveling of a marriage under the crown's crushing weight? Speculation ran wild. Would Camilla retreat into the background, quietly sidelined? Or would she fight for visibility in an institution that seemed determined to erase her? Meanwhile, the tabloids went into overdrive. They didn't hesitate to draw comparisons: Sarah Ferguson, Princess Diana, Meghan Markle, and now Camilla, another woman on the ever-growing list of royal exiles. The whispers grew louder. The shadows of history were closing in. Was this the beginning of her end, or the first spark of a quiet rebellion still waiting to ignite? Behind the viral headlines and frenzied commentary, one question echoed louder than all the rest. If Camilla could be erased so swiftly, who or what was truly safe? Because this wasn't just about one woman's name vanishing from parchment. This was the monarchy showing its hand, signaling that the next era would not be built on sentiment, but on strategy. And with Camilla out, the message was unmistakable. The future rested on 4 shoulders, and 4 alone: King Charles, Princess Anne, Prince William, Princess Catherine. These weren't simply names. They were the architects of a new royal order. Together, this core 4 is quietly but decisively redrawing the blueprint of monarchy in the 21st century. Gone is the sprawling, decades-old model where cousins, uncles, and extended royals filled ceremonial roles across the Commonwealth. In its place, a stripped-down, sharpened institution designed for survival in a world less forgiving, less patient, and far more watchful than ever before. In its place emerges a concentrated nucleus of influence. Palace insiders confirm that every major royal engagement, from state visits to national celebrations, will now be executed solely by this elite circle. What began years ago as Charles's passing ambition for a slimmed-down monarchy has moved beyond theory. It is now practice, edging toward law. Camilla's exclusion didn't just leave a gap, it created a vacuum, one already being filled. Responsibilities once tied to her office, especially ceremonial duties, are being quietly redistributed. Princess Catherine, with her unmatched public approval and diplomatic finesse, is stepping into the spotlight as the monarchy's most visible bridge to the people. Princess Anne, already burdened with an unforgiving schedule, will further entrench her role as the institution's most trusted executor, the tireless workhorse of the crown. What was once shared among a sprawling royal network is now concentrated into a formidable inner square, not out of malice, but out of necessity. This is strategy. This is survival. Charles's vision of a streamlined, efficient monarchy is no longer a distant ideal. It has become operational, piece by piece, decree by decree. Behind this vision lies a single motive: survival. Preserve the crown's legitimacy by cutting away its excess. In an age where scrutiny is merciless and the media's bite is sharper than any sword, the monarchy no longer has the privilege of bloated symbolism. It must be lean, it must be transparent, and above all, it must be functional. That is the mandate Charles and Anne are now enforcing with surgical precision. But this is not just about schedules or ceremonies. It is about power. Internal discussions have already begun about dismantling inherited honours, many of them still attached to Camilla. Titles that once seemed permanent, bestowed in another era of expectations, may no longer survive in this new framework. Each removal, each reassigned role, will feel like a quiet undoing of everything she fought to legitimize. Yet the institution has moved on, and it is moving with speed. Future decrees, insiders warn, will not stop at ceremonial reshuffling. They may press into constitutional reform, codifying this slimmed-down monarchy into permanence. If enacted, it would mark the most radical transformation since the earliest years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. But this time, it isn't inheritance dictating the shape of the crown. It is deliberate choice, strategy forged under pressure, not to defend her legacy, but perhaps to redefine it. Camilla has already cancelled multiple public appearances with no explanation beyond silence. Where her name once filled the royal calendar, charity dinners, garden tours, diplomatic receptions, there are now empty spaces. Some whisper she's simply exhausted. Others insist she's holding back, waiting to re-emerge with precision, not with a speech, not with a press conference, but with carefully placed words, funneled through sympathetic journalists who've long served as her quiet allies. If true, it would be more than damage control. It would be a direct challenge to the monarchy's united front and a pointed strike at those who engineered her exclusion. And the rumours don't stop there. Palace insiders murmur that Camilla may be weighing something far more drastic, a gradual retreat from public life, not announced as exile, not framed as defeat, but presented as dignity, a graceful exit cloaked in the language of health, privacy, and personal balance. But not everyone believes she's ready to fade away. Some within the royal inner circle insist Camilla is playing the long game, quietly positioning herself as a steady force for when the current storm passes and the balance of power inevitably shifts again. One aide, speaking on condition of anonymity, described her as more determined now than ever. Yet beneath the surface of strategy lies a fragile truth: tension with the one person who once protected her at all costs. King Charles, though publicly steadfast at her side, is reportedly under immense pressure behind the scenes. The emotional weight of the decree, combined with mounting responsibilities and Anne's growing influence, has driven a quiet wedge between them. The man who once shielded her from every fire now finds himself torn between love and duty, a balancing act that is starting to fray. Even Camilla's relationships with William and Catherine, once polite and cordial, have grown distant. The Princess of Wales, rising in prominence, has absorbed many roles that were once Camilla's domain. And William, ever vigilant about the monarchy's image, is believed to back the streamlining that sidelined her. What was once shared purpose has shifted into cold distance, and Camilla, ever aware of every subtle shift, is said to feel it deeply. She may not be making headlines now, but make no mistake, Queen Camilla is far from finished. Whether she fights quietly from within or steps back with measured grace to preserve what dignity remains, her next move could change more than just her position. It could shape the final chapter of her royal life. As the crown rewrites itself, the question is no longer what she has lost, but what she is willing to do to reclaim her place before the monarchy moves on without her. With Camilla erased from the royal decree, an era is closing, quietly but undeniably. The woman who once stood beside the king, defying convention, now stands on uncertain ground, her influence tested like never before. And as the monarchy moves into its next chapter, Camilla's place has never been more fragile. What began as whispers has now taken root in policy. Her omission wasn't symbolic. It was the first step in a structural shift. In this new order, the crown she once seemed destined to share is quietly being reshaped without her. The implications are profound. Camilla's public duties, once routine and expected, are under quiet review. Insiders say a full retreat from the spotlight is now a real possibility. Framed as personal choice, health, or well-being, the message beneath it is unmistakable. She is no longer central to royal planning. And in a monarchy that relies on clarity, symbolism, and optics, such a withdrawal speaks louder than any official statement ever could. For the line of succession, the timing is perfect. By streamlining the royal face of the institution to Charles, Anne, William, and Catherine, the monarchy has cleared the path for its next generation, decisive, controlled, and unmistakably in their hands. With Camilla stepping back, the public's gaze can now settle squarely on William and Kate, the couple many see as the embodiment of a modern royal family. No longer overshadowed by Charles's complicated past, their image stands stronger, unburdened, and unmistakably focused. For the institution, that's a win. Public trust, battered by scandal and controversy in recent years, is slowly beginning to recover under Anne's steady hand and William's rising prominence. The streamlining isn't just strategic, it's restorative. But beneath the surface of that restoration lies a bitter truth. King Charles's legacy is now being shaped not just by what he built, but by who and what he had to release. Letting go of Camilla so visibly, whether by pressure, persuasion, or choice, marks a turning point in how history may remember him. Not as the romantic who defied the world for love, but as the monarch who recalibrated his reign to preserve the crown. For some, it's noble. For others, cold. But for Charles, it may have been the only way to protect the institution he spent a lifetime preparing to inherit. And still, one question lingers. Will Camilla fade quietly into the backdrop of history, or will she make one final stand before the curtain falls? The world is watching every move. Some believe she will bow out with grace, letting silence speak louder than any retaliation. Others suspect she's biding her time, waiting for the perfect moment to reassert herself in ways only she knows. Because if Camilla's decades-long evolution has taught us anything, it's this: she does not disappear without leaving a mark. As the ink dries on the decree that erased her name, one thing is clear: the monarchy is no longer the same. The faces may be familiar, but the foundation has shifted. And whether for better or worse, the consequences of this transition are only beginning to ripple across the kingdom. This wasn't just a change in names, it was a shift in legacy, and the world won't stop watching what comes next.